Let's get underway.
Welcome, everybody, to Underway. We have an absolutely illustrious guest for you today. Normally, we bring you interviews from players and GMs and other podcasters, but this is the first time we have an actual writer on the show. I'm very excited for this conversation. The author of Goal, Awesome Soccer Stories and Fun Facts for Kids. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Carlos Mojica. Carlos, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing today, man?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So happy to have you here. And, thank you for dealing with us, rescheduling this, while I was out on vacation. Couldn't think of a better episode than this to jump back into. First and foremost, I want to reiterate that your book, Goal, is available wherever you purchase books. Everyone go pick up a copy. And secondly, you've done something that a lot of people talk about doing, but never actually achieve or actualize in their life. You had an idea, you took the steps to actually write a book. Where did you get that inspiration? And I mean, I guess even like the audacity to know, like, hey, I want to write a book and one on soccer.
So, when I first started in college, I was actually an English major, and my
Hmm.
goal was to become a writer. After about 2, 3 semesters, I decided that I didn't need an English major to be a writer. So, all that to say, writing has always been my first love. As far as the idea for this book, when I think of soccer, I think of the joy that it brings to people. And when you think of joy, you think of children. So with the World Cup coming up this year, it was just a natural connection. Quarter kids approached me with the opportunity, and I dove head right in, and it's been exciting. It's been I've been working on the book for about a year prior to coming out, and it's I'm excited for it. I was excited to write it. It's even cooler now that I'm seeing it like on the shelf.
Yeah. I bet that's like such a surreal feeling to know something that you created is like tactical in somebody's hands and they can enjoy it. Like, what does that feeling feel like?
Oh man, it's I love the idea that I can maybe inspire a kid to want to read, or that I can spark their love for the game if they don't have one.
Mhm.
I've been telling people that one of the goals with this book is that you can give this to a child that has never heard about soccer, and then by the time that they're done with it, they not only have an education on soccer, but they're in love with the sport.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it feels like you have a vast encyclopedia inside your head of like soccer knowledge, and that comes across within the book. But like, what specifically, made you decide, let's gear this towards this specific demographic? I know you mentioned, a love of sports and like kids specifically, but like, yeah, when Cordo Kids like approached you, did you kind of have that idea in mind, or was it like their idea coming to you, like, hey, we want you to do this?
Well, so part of it is I'm I first got into soccer when I was about 7 or so. And I remember being that age and wanting to learn and just absorb the sport. I used to clip the newspaper. So I grew up in El Salvador. I should
Hmm.
probably establish that first. And like most other Latin American countries, soccer is the predominant sport. So you can't escape it. And I just remember wanting to learn and asking my dad questions. I tell people that I fell in love with soccer because of Ronaldo Nazario de Lima, the original Ronaldo.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember going up to my dad and saying, "Hey, that Ronaldo guy is really good." And he would say, "Yeah, it's all right." But Maradona is where it's at. And and so, to some degree, this is the book that I wish I'd had back then
Yeah.
to learn about these players, and a book that I hope can inspire conversations between parents and children, whether it's a mom or dad passing down the knowledge onto their children and bonding over it, or whether it's a parent wanting to learn about the sport that their child loves.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned your father, but you're a new father as well. Congrats.
Thank you.
Fatherhood is incredibly incredible and tiring at the same time. It's a gift that keeps on giving. And I don't know if you had the chance to think about it, but have you thought about like how this is also a gift to your child, to basically get him into the sport?
Yeah, so I jokingly say it so I can indoctrinate him into soccer, but No, when I started writing the book, I didn't know that, you know, I didn't know that my son was going to be coming so soon, so to speak. But I had it in the back of my head that I wanted to one day read this book to my child.
Mm.
And now that he's here, uh, it, I'm excited about the prospect of sitting down with him and reading it to him. In fact, I've already read it to him. He may not understand it, but for me, it was special. So,
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you gotta get in his mind quickly, so that you can develop the
yeah.
next Messi.
Yeah, I got to inception that.
Yeah. I want to, touch on your personal story a little bit. You mentioned you were born in El Salvador, and your story, I feel is like the epitome of what people say is like the American dream. You moved to Ohio from El Salvador, of all places, a state that I lived in for 18 years of my life. The second I turned 18, I got out. Can you touch on what it was like growing up in El Salvador and growing your love of soccer there and the eventual move to Ohio?
So I grew up in El Salvador and I moved to the US when I was 11. And usually my ritual was I would get home from school around noon because the school hours are different over there. I would eat lunch. I would watch the Champions League as I was doing homework. And then I would go out and play on the street with my friends. And when I say the street, I don't mean a rough neighborhood or anything like that. I
Mm,
mean literally the street in front of my house. We would just play until it got dark and did that for years. When I moved to the US in 1998, soccer wasn't as big as it is now. And it was starting to grow, but I moved to Medina, which is in Northeast Ohio. It's a very rural area. And so I went from playing soccer every day after school to occasionally playing soccer in gym class. I joined a youth league, or not a youth league, a youth team when I was in fifth grade. And then I didn't play again until high school when we had a soccer team. And unfortunately, our levy didn't pass, and so I wasn't able to keep playing after my freshman year, which was a bummer for me. So after that, I would just consume soccer, watch TV, watch the World Cup, and I picked it up again when I was in college, just intramurals and playing with friends or Sunday leagues.
yeah. So, I mentioned, I also grew up in Ohio, right outside of Toledo. El Salvador and Ohio probably couldn't be more different. How was the culture, I guess like lack of culture shock moving to a state, where everything at such like a young age is changing socially and environmentally?
So I had culture shock, but in the opposite way than people usually think. Everyone thought, oh, you're coming from a small country and you're coming to the US, big city, but really, I had grown up in the capital. I
Mm,
walked everywhere. There were cars. You could walk everywhere, take public transportation. And growing up in Medina, it was very rural. It would take you maybe 20 minutes to get to a supermarket. So I did have that shock, but it was almost in reverse of what
okay.
people expect. Mhm.
Yeah. Um, So, and for people who don't know, do you mind touching on your life as a journalist before stepping into the realm of becoming a writer? I know you started out in Cleveland, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How
So,
how did you
oh, go
even
ahead.
get
Sorry.
your start in soccer?
So I was in grad school, and someone asked me to write an article for their magazine, Centro Deportivo. And so the first match that I covered, and I said it in quotations because I covered remotely, was the U.S. Costa Rica game played in the snow in 2013.
Yeah.
And I liked it. And after that, I began to actually cover matches in person for the magazine. So it's a bilingual magazine. I was covering the men's national team, the U.S. men's national team, and the Columbus Crew. And after about 2.5, 3 years of doing that, I kind of decided that I wanted to be more on the club side of things.
Hmm.
I like the idea that I could maybe contribute to a club, a team, and help work towards something. And so I began seeking out opportunities. At the time, the closest teams that I had to me in Cleveland, the professional teams were either Pittsburgh, which was 2 hours one way, or the Columbus Crew, which was 2 hours the other way. And I was already covering them. I So it's like, okay, I can't really get an internship there because it's just not feasible.
Yeah.
But I came across a team called AFC Cleveland from the National Premier Soccer League, which is the equivalent of the third, fourth division.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the website and thinking, there's a lot that I could do here if they need help. So I reached out to the owner. I said, I can help you do better recaps. I can help you do coverage in Spanish. There's a huge Hispanic population in Cleveland that you're not tapping into. And so the owner let me join the club with the understanding that I was essentially going to be running the communications program. And it was nice because I had the freedom to do whatever I wanted.
Hmm.
Uh, and failing was part of it. I got to try a little bit of things here and there to see what worked and what didn't work. I did that in 2015 and 2016. And in 2016, I also worked that year with the National Premier Soccer League. I was a coordinator
Hmm.
for the league. That was a paid position at that point. And then 2016 is also a year that AFC Cleveland won the championship, the NWSL championship. So I got to be a part of that. I got to host the final, and that was really cool to do that. At the end of that year, I applied and I accepted a position with the Columbus Crew, and that was with the Columbus Crew from 2016 until 2022.
Hmm.
So I got to be part of a lot of different things, including winning 2020 MLS Cup, the COVID year,
Yeah.
opening up the Ohio Health Performance Center, and opening up at the time New Crew Stadium, now Scott's Miracle Grove Field. So I
Yeah.
was very lucky that I got to be part of so many cool things there. Since that time, even though I don't work in soccer full time, I still do freelancing, and I've had the chance to work for CONCACAF and the two recent editions of the Gold Cup, as well as for MLS as the venue press officer for the MLS All-Star Game in 2024 and Leagues Cup. So
Hmm.
I'm glad to still be involved.
That's great, man. And you were also involved in starting up Crew 2, which,
Yes.
huge accomplishment in MLS Next Pro. Can you touch on what it was like to, help build out a team that, even now it just felt so incredibly dominant in such an early part of that league?
So it was a really cool thing to do because I got to help launch this new, not club because it's part of
Yeah.
the crew, this new brand. And really what made it so special were the supporters. I mean, the whole Nordeck, I just got behind it. The capybaras was something that grew very organically. And so we
Yeah.
leaned into that. Uh, and it was special because even though I left halfway, about three-fourths of the way through the season, I actually got the chance to come back and do PA announcements for the MLS Next Pro Cup run.
Hmm.
And so all the playoff games, I was on the microphone. I still I got to see the fruits of my labor to some
Yeah.
degree. And I was there when we won the championship. And then I ended up doing PA announcements for the club the following two seasons. And so that was really cool. I mean, few people can say they help launch a team, and I
Yeah.
get to say that. So.
That's very cool. And, I think one thing that comes across is, not only taking your shot on yourself, going out to Cleveland and being like, hey, I can help you with this, but like the multifaceted amount of things that you do, and like everybody in soccer does, where it's like I'm PA announcing, I'm handling comms, I'm starting a team. Like, how did it feel working in an environment where like every day is completely different?
It was very challenging, but it was also very fun. I mean, the hecticness is a part of what makes sports so unique, and it's something you don't get in other fields.
Hmm.
There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Like you said, every day is different. People would ask me what my day-to-day looked like, and I never knew what to tell them because every day was different. I could give them a rough idea of what the week looked like. You have a match on Saturday or Sunday that you have to prepare for, but what happens between the last game and the upcoming game depends on the week. You might have some activities that you're doing with a partnership. You might have some player signings, some interviews that you're going on a TV or radio station. Uh, you're going to a radio station with a player, and it's very different, and that's part of what makes it so fun and so special.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a huge pool of young people who are, looking to get their foot in the door and work for soccer clubs. You touched on your path, but do you have any advice, to those who want to break into this career?
The best thing that I can tell people is that the worst thing anyone can tell you is no. So just ask,
Yeah,
reach out. I think sometimes people look at lower leagues, minor leagues as less than, but the beauty of a lower league or a minor league is that because they maybe have a smaller staff, you get to do more. You get to
yeah,
try more. The NPSL gave me a chance to try a lot of things, and I was able to learn a lot that way.
yeah. All right, man. Let's jump into the book. The reason why you're here. The thing that I love about this book, and something that I mentioned to you is learning things that even I didn't know before. And the amount of information in it, it doesn't seem overwhelming at all. Like it feels fun to flip through. What was the process like? Selecting all of the icons for it.
So that was probably the hardest part. Not so
Hmm.
much getting the initial list down, but whittling it down.
Yeah.
As you know, the book has both men and women players, and so you have limited room, and at some point you have to make the cut. But the way that I view it is, it's not a definitive list of the greatest players of all time.
Hmm.
It's a sampling of the players that have captured the imagination of supporters throughout the world. A lot of these players have captured my imagination, and so I included them.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot of gatekeeping in soccer, which can be kind of wild sometimes. Like you didn't know this player who was like a midfielder in the 92 like Blackburn squad, like you don't know anything. And I think that we're around the same age, but like how is it to include older players that, you maybe didn't see live, but were important to have in the player profiles?
A lot of it went back to what players did my dad tell me about?
Yeah.
And so it's at its core, it is based on that parent-child relationship.
Hmm.
But yeah, just players that if you look at history, they've made an impact. There's a lot of players for whom there's very little footage, but their name and their story transcends the field.
Yeah.
And so they're on there.
Yeah.
Um, but the research was fun.
Yeah. I mean, you also included a profile of the greatest player of all time in this book, Andriy Shevchenko. Just an aside, I appreciate you put him in there. The dude deserved like a two-page profile in my book, but there are profiles that are larger than others. I know the editing process, like you mentioned, was, probably very tedious, but how did you decide on players that, needed a more holistic biography than just like, hey, here's this person and this is kind of what they're known for?
So that was probably the hardest part. I mean, I think when I started, most of the biographies were probably twice as long as they are now,
Okay.
and I had to whittle it down.
Hmm.
Uh, I tried to stay as unbiased as I could when it came to which players should get more text, and so I focused on what's maybe traditionally been seen as the greatest of.
Okay.
Again, that's subject to debate,
Hmm.
but Maradona, Pelé, Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, yes.
That guy over there.
Yeah, so some of these guys have a little bit more. Uh, a lot of it has to do with their accomplishments. Mia Hamm, there's a lot
Hmm.
about her because she contributed so much to the game. Um, And there were some that were hard to do because they were like my favorite players, and
Yeah.
I want to just keep writing and writing about them. But I was like,
Hmm.
okay, no, bring it down a notch.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really cool to have, basically like a digestible encyclopedia for people to read about, the game players. I think you did a good job of making the book, something that you can keep going back to and learning more and more about. Is that the hope for the book as well in your eyes of like, hey, you can keep flipping through this and maybe see something that you overlooked the first time?
Yes, I mean, do you remember the Guinness Book of World Records?
Oh yeah, I grew up in the 90s.
Of course you did. Everyone remembers it.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part of about that book was that whenever you got time to go to the library in school, you would grab it, you would flip through it with your friends, and you would either go back to the thing that stuck out to you the last time, or you would
Hmm.
try to find something new. And so with this book, I tried to emulate that feeling.
Hmm.
There's a lot of trivia throughout the book that where maybe a player doesn't get a whole profile, but there's a little section about them.
Yeah.
And the hope here is that it's those little bits of trivia. I said earlier that the hope is that you can give this book to a kid that's never been into soccer and they come to love it by the end of it. But my other goal, no pun intended, was that you could give this to a child that already loves soccer and they maybe learn something new about their favorite player, or
Yeah.
they discover that maybe player A was inspired by player B, and so now player B becomes their second favorite player.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, and after finishing this book, do you have any plans to write another one?
Oh man, I would love to write another one. I think it'd be cool to do one that's based on the CONCACAF region, right?
Yeah.
Uh, there's so many cool stories in the book that I would love to include. In fact, in goal, I have Jorge Mágico González, who's
Hmm.
considered the greatest Salvadoran player of all time. And so I would love to explore maybe some of those Central American players that maybe don't get as much attention.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think we would love to write another one. We'll see if that happens. It's also very, very time consuming.
Yeah.
So,
You know what? I've never done it, and I can only assume that it would be very time consuming. All right. Well, we've taken up a lot of your time already. We've handled two internet crash outs on my side. So we're gonna end this with a rapid fire Q&A game we like to call Let's Get Underway. What's the best thing about working for a professional sports team?
ooh, with the crew was definitely the food.
Yeah.
You always know you're going to be fed when you're traveling with a team because players gotta eat and you get to eat. So
That's great. How do you introduce yourself now? Do you pull out the author card?
no, I haven't yet.
Ooh. See, now if I
I don't
wrote a
know.
book, I'd bring it out hey, accomplished author Tyler Wise. I'd bring it out at every single stop.
Yeah, it's I should probably start doing that, huh?
Yeah. I mean, you wrote a book. I would do the same thing, man. Um, all right. This is like a this or that. El Salvador winning their second Gold Cup or the Crew winning their fourth MLS championship.
Oh man. Uh, I like to see El Salvador win their second Gold Cup.
Okay. I tried to make it a little tough because I
Yeah.
would like go to the World Cup. I'm like, yeah, that would easily win. Um, what's the coolest moment of your career?
Winning MLS Cup 2020 was very, very special for a myriad of reasons.
Hmm.
And so probably that.
Yeah. Um, you've touched on a couple of players who, you liked growing up, but did you have a favorite player growing up and a favorite team?
So my favorite player of all time is that guy behind me, Paolo Maldini.
Hmm.
Even though I was never a AC Milan fan, I always respected him, but I just always really liked him. I was a defender, so I think he's the greatest defender that's ever lived. My favorite team growing up, Barcelona was a team that got me into soccer because I was watching Ronaldo.
Hmm.
Um, and I really liked Arsenal because of Dennis Bergkamp, who's also in
Okay.
the book.
Yeah. Um, is there anyone that you left out of the book thinking back now that you maybe should have included?
You know, if we were to play that game, I would be here all day. But what I what I'll say is I've included in the book the players that I wanted to include. There were a lot of really, really close calls.
Hmm.
Alessandro Del Piero is a player that I love who's not in the book. But you know, maybe if there's a second edition, he'll be on there. So
There you go. Did you feel a responsibility to include certain stories or players because of like the swirl around their name? Like I can't leave out this player because people are going to be looking for it.
yes and no. There are some players that are probably not in the book that others would have had.
Hmm.
There's some where I was like, there's some way that I can leave this guy out just because I couldn't live with myself.
Hmm. And then final message to anyone reading your book.
You know, I hope that you really enjoy it. I spent a lot of time working on it, and I'm hoping that I did the players in the book justice. I hope that you're able to share it with your friends and family. And if you read it, please take a photo of it. You can tag me at CD Mojica on Instagram and Threads or CD underscore Mojica on Twitter. Let me know what you think.
Yeah.
I really would love to hear your thoughts on the book.
I'm not a big reader. I read your book, and I did enjoy it. And, I read a couple excerpts to my son as well, who's a little bit older than my daughter, so he kind of understood what was going on. But you did a phenomenal job, man. Really, really happy to have you on Underway. Any parting words for our listeners besides go pick up your copy of Goal?
You know, this book will get you ready for the World Cup. So if you're someone that loves the World Cup and has kids and wants to get them into it, this will prepare them for it. If you're someone that's curious about the World Cup because it's now happening in our backyard, this book will get you ready for it. So
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Carlos. Appreciate you coming on Underway.
thank you.
Underway has been brought to you by 818 Productions. Any use of Underway either acquired through podcast or video format that is captured by a third party with proper credentials requires the direct written consent of 818 Productions and must be used in compliance with all requirements and restrictions stated therein.